Comic-Con at home. I am Nick Martorelli with Penguin Random House Audio, and as much as we all wish we were out there with you guys, we are thrilled to put this panel together to discuss our newest Star Wars audio original, Star Wars Dr. Aphra by Sarah Kuhn. As I said, I'm Nick Martorelli. I'm the producer of this project, and I am joined by some very talented folk. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you right now.
I'll go first. Hi, I'm Sarah Kuhn. I'm a writer. I write novels and comic books mostly. I'm probably best known for a series called Heroine Complex, which is all about Asian American superheroines fighting things like demonic cupcakes and bad karaoke. And yeah, it's lots of fun. That's me.
And I'm Emily Wu Zeller. I am an actor, voice actor, dancer, and singer. And I play Dog Aphra.
I'm Marc Thompson. I'm an actor. I'm a voice actor. I do a lot of work in animation, and I've done a bunch of audiobooks, and specifically, I think I'm around 60 specifically Star Wars audiobooks, so that's been a lot of fun. And I play Han and Chewie and Bosk and a bunch of people that die, and I get to play Darth Vader.
It was like he was here. Chills. And I'm Elizabeth Schaefer. I'm the creative director for licensed publishing at Del Rey, and I oversee all of our licensed stories, from Star Wars to Stranger Things to just, if it's nerdy, I do it.
Great, thank you guys. So I want to start off this conversation with Sarah and Elizabeth talking about sort of, well, frankly, we did Star Wars Dooku last year, and then we looked at this. We want to do another audio original. So Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you, why Dr. Aphra?
I mean, why not? Obviously, but. So basically, you know, we had done Dooku, and it was such a success. I love that audio original, and we were looking for what's kind of the next step. And we had always wanted to do something with Aphra. She's such a cool character, and I think audio is a really cool format for her because she just bursts off the page with such a strong voice. So to actually be able to hear that is really exciting. And we also decided pretty early on, I don't know if there are even any other names. We were like, it needs to be Sarah Kuhn. She mentioned the Heroine Complex series. If anyone out there hasn't read it, please walk, don't run, or I guess download the ebook. Don't go anywhere. Never mind. Anyway, read it because it's just exactly that right tone that you would want for an Aphra story, which is just fun and snarky and a delight. So pretty early on in the process, we were like, we want to do Aphra, and we want Sarah Kuhn to write it.
So, Sarah, do you want to talk about getting the gig, and what was your association with Star Wars before this? Were you a fan?
Yes. I mean, I feel like you ask just about any writer who writes speculative fiction, their answer is going to be a very enthusiastic yes. Yes, I was a Star Wars obsessive from very young. I still have probably photos of myself dressed as Princess Leia and trying to do the cinnamon buns when I was a little child. And, you know, have continued to love it just as passionately into adulthood. And so I got an email. I got like that exciting email that you're always waiting for. And it said, it was from my agent, and I think it said like, there's an offer for you for Star Wars. So I was like, freak out. And then I didn't even read the next sentence. And then the next sentence was like, and it's Aphra. And I was like, freak out times a million, because she's like my favorite character. I think she is maybe the best character in the Star Wars canon. And so yeah, it was just really exciting. And I actually didn't know, Elizabeth, that I was kind of zeroed in on that quickly. I mean, I think that a lot of us writers just assume for a lot of things you have like a list of names as long as your arm, and we're just like really excited to be on it. So that's like, I'm like internally freaking out all over again to know that that was like an immediate match.
So, all right, so now you've got the job, you've got the gig, everyone's freaking out because we're all excited. Sarah and Elizabeth, you want to talk about like the approach now, what this story is doing, how you guys work together on the script?
Sure. I mean, I think what we wanted to set up right away is that, this is partially an adaptation from the Darth Vader Marvel comic series where she was first introduced, which is a great starting point if you want to get to know Aphra, but it's not her story. She is a part of Vader's story. So I think it was really important to us to have this introduction point for this amazing character that was her story. I think that's fair to say, Sarah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think one of the first conversations we had about it, because of course, one of the first things we did was both Elizabeth and I was go back and reread that Darth Vader comic series by Kieran Gillen and Salvador Larroca, and it's so amazing. It's so good. It's so good in terms of both Darth Vader and Aphra. Like she just kind of comes in, and there's sort of like weird like relationship like dynamic together is so amazing right from the beginning. So we both reread that, and I think kind of looked at what is the story that exists here and what can we kind of do to make it a little bit more her, make it a little bit bigger. And I know that one of the first things that we decided was to put it 100% in her POV. There was a little bit just of discussion of like, who's telling this story? Is it third person? Is it 000 or something like that? But I really wanted to tell this story in her voice. I just think her voice is so delightful, and the way that Kieran Gillen established her is so like amazing. Like she just kind of like swoops into the page and grabs you by the throat. And so that was really like, I know, an approach we wanted to take really like right off. And then I think like for me, the sort of line that Kieran Gillen had written that kind of like brought it together was, she says something like, the way I've lived, I know I'm lucky to be alive. And to me, that was like, so the character, like, I think she's so fun because she sits at this weird intersection where she's always craving the most like chaotic adventure. Like she's kind of just like a chaos monster. She wants everything to be exciting and thrilling and you don't know what's going to happen, but at the same time she also has this survival instinct. It's part of who she is. It's, you know, what has kind of shaped her, and those two things are obviously very much in conflict. So I thought that line was really kind of the basis we started from in telling this from her POV and sort of getting what the story would be.
And Nick, you were also involved in a lot of those early conversations, because I know how to do words that, audiobooks are a little bit new to me. So that was really great to have you there. Is there like, how do you approach adapting and giving advice to people translating some a visual story into audiobooks? I know early on you had some really great notes for Sarah and myself about like, keep these in mind while you're writing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, that's part of the challenge, right? When you're trying to take something that is so essentially a visual medium and adapt it into a visual-less medium. Like all of the words have to do so much more work. And so there's this sort of thing where, Sarah, you wrote such great, the framing sequence that the story has in Aphra's voice is so much fun because it lets us skip around time. It lets us let her tell the story as she perceives it, as she understands it, as she is able to witness it. So some of those early conversations too were all of us going through the comics like, well, she's not in any of these issues, so we can't have this subplot. This whole thing is going to go because Aphra's off doing something on her own. I guess, and my biggest thing for this one adapting is just a sense of pacing. Like, comic books extend time in a way when you're going from panel to panel to panel or from page to page. And that is all smack dab in real time in an audiobook. So a lot of that sort of A lot of that stuff that I think you did a good job with, Sarah, was sort of figuring out like, how long can someone talk before they need to be interrupted? And like, you know, pages of dialogue need droids beeping at you along the way. Sort of pull everything apart and expand it a little bit.
Yeah, I have to say that was like one of those days as a writer or creator of any kind where you're just like, how is this my job? Because there is literally a sequence, which I think I cut down like a little bit, where it's like these two droids just beeping at each other, and they're making different sounds because they're different droids. So they have different like voices, like their beeps sound different, but it was like writing these pages of dialogue of these droids beeping at each other. And I had to say that is one of those moments where you're like, how is this my job? I can't, like, this is something I can't like explain to anyone really, that I'm getting paid to do this.
Those pages were very easy to record. We were in the section like skipping straight through them. You know, no one's sitting there just going beep beep beep, and it's all great. But speaking of recording, I want to bring Emily and Marc into the conversation as two of the actors who are in the 9-person cast. And I'll look to you first, Emily. This is your first audiobook in the Star Wars universe, although truly not your first audiobook in any way. So could you talk a little bit about how you got involved?
Well, Nick Martorelli sent me an email and said, hey, this is really hush hush, but yeah, would you be willing to submit an audition for this Star Wars thing? I said, yes. And so I immediately sent something in. And the tone was obviously different from most audiobooks because it is so forward, because it is an adaptation of a comic. That's how I got involved, was thanks to Nick. I didn't find this out on my own. I did know about Sarah Kuhn before, from, you know, because your work is work that I've been familiar with for years, and is very much in the realm of the kind of work that I really like to sink my teeth into. As an actor and as an audiobook narrator and voiceover artist, I've had the opportunity to do a super wide range of stuff. So I've really, you know, done everything from strict academic nonfiction, whatever, into fantasy, sci-fi, 15-year-old who's kicking ass kind of thing. And those are, they all have value, but I have the most fun with stuff that is in this vein. And it was really great to exercise those animation muscles, those interactive muscles, because in audiobooks, you have to sort of pull back a lot more. You don't get to be as forward because the action is not as forward. So it was really great to get to play with this one.
So talk about the recording of it. Like, what was it like?
Very intense. Aphra is a larger than life character, and she's awesome. And she is, I feel like, my alter ego in a lot of ways. Like, I really, if I could be in the world that way, I would be in the world that way. And it's only because she's larger than life that she can exist there and not here. So I'm glad that she's around. I'm not making much sense, but I'm trying to say that I love her. That's the point. Anyway, so it took she is telling the story, and she is in the scenes that happen as she's telling the story. So she's a lot of this drama, and that's awesome. And it was also just super intense. It was a very intense recording session, and we worked a lot to make sure that we got it right. And yeah.
I got to go and listen in on one of the recording sessions, and you were doing this very emotional low point for Aphra, and I was literally crying on the Zoom call and muting myself, being like, play it cool, it's fine, and just how you could just burst out with this beautiful, raw, amazing scene, and then just like, oh, turn it off and be like, oh, was that good? Did you get what you need? It's just amazing to see.
I mean, you like just. I knew writing that you would, whoever got that part would have to do so much, because it is in her POV. We wrote it in first person, or I wrote it in first person, and so it was kind of like this long monologue, you know, that's sometimes interrupted by these scenes of things happening that, as you said, you are still in. So I kind of felt like when I wrote a graphic novel and I made one of the settings the giant library, and then I realized later that artist would have to draw all those books. So I feel very bad about that. And I also feel a little bit guilty about this. So thank you for putting all of that in and reciting that basically 300-page monologue.
Yeah, no reason to feel guilty at all. It was a challenge I was extremely happy to take on. Yeah,
that was something that was different from this one versus the last one. Our Dooku Jedi Lost one from last year. Like, we realized about halfway through recording with you, Emily, that like Aphra talks far more than Dooku or Ventress did in the last one, in terms of telling their own story and being their own voice of agency. And it's one thing for me as a producer to see it on the page, like, Aphra, oh yeah, that's her line. And then you turn 3 pages looking for the next person to talk, and you make that note, okay, yeah, and then Vader talks. And it's a whole other thing to be there like, oh wait, she's got to talk for 3 solid pages in this narration that, like, that, you know, that flows beautifully through all of these different thoughts and all of these different progressions. But it's really easy to turn the pages, and then suddenly Emily had to say it all out loud, and I was like, man, I'm impressed.
Yeah, writers are jerks. That's what you should all take away from this. Is writers are big jerks, because we don't have to do any of that. And it's funny that you're saying, like, then you would mark, like, on Dooku, like, it's this person now, because I feel like with this one you would be like, it's Aphra giving a monologue. Who talks next? It's Aphra again, but this time, like, in the scene.
well, and the challenge with that, speaking on what Elizabeth was talking about, was not just in the very obvious beats that are written, but in finding like her emotional arcs throughout, so that it isn't just a flat, not that you wrote something flat at all, but when you're performing, right, we're always trying to find subtext and other points of orientation in the scene to color it more, to bring it more to life. And that's more challenging when it's you against your own brain, right, or the character against their own brain. But that was also part of the fun, was just really getting to explore what her ins and outs are in every corner of her non-square brain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the joy Elizabeth and I had in it too, was just that she has so many contradictions. And obviously, like, all of us know that, you know, our inner voice sometimes sounds a little bit different than our outer voice. And I think she is always very much herself, but there are a lot of different shades of her that I think we were trying to bring out in the writing of it, and then it sounds like in the production of it, where she obviously is this person who has so much bravado. That's one of the most fun things about her, right? Is she has so much bravado. She has so much charisma. Like I said, she just swoops into the page and you kind of can't pay attention to anything else. At least I can. And so I feel like for me as a writer as well, like finding those sort of softer parts of her, finding the parts that were hurt, finding the parts that were kind of like driving why she is the way she is something that I was really, really excited to get into. But I think kind of in the same way is a challenge from the writing standpoint, because you have to find that and not make it seem false, right? Like not make it seem like either of these sides of her is a put on. They're both very real. And I think making that authentic, both in the writing and the acting of it, is very difficult.
I'm going to bring in one of the other voices for that occasionally interrupts Dr. Aphra in the radio show. Marc, Darth Vader, variety of aliens, some Wookiees. I don't have the list in front of me about who else. C-3PO, Han Solo.
Yep.
I don't have I don't have any lists. I don't have the list in front of me.
You got them all.
So talk about this one for you. How was it for this one? And along the way, like, how is this different from Dooku?
Well, I mean, it's super fun because I get to play these iconic characters that I've grown up with and are a huge part of my life. So that's always an honor and a ton of fun. This one had its challenges because I guess especially compared to Dooku, because to be honest, when I heard that there was a chance that we were going to do this and I might get to be a part of it, I was really looking forward to the experience again, because what I loved about Dooku is being able to play off of the other actors, and we kind of got to be in the studio together, and I was really looking forward to meeting you, Emily, and working with you and all that. So, but since this happened during quarantine times, you know, not only was I not in a studio by myself, but I was in like my kid's bedroom, you know, and I had like ironing boards with blankets, and I was putting like surfboards up to try to dampen echo and sound. And I was dealing with like the first day of the record, they decided to like tear a scaffolding down across the street from me. And I was just like, ah! So we're battling all kinds of, you know, ambient noise and stuff, and it was really hard. And then my wife is a therapist, and so she, you know, I'm recording in here and she's trying to have a meaningful conversation in the other room. And there was one day where she was like, "What were you doing today?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And it's like you were screaming. I was like, "Oh." And it turns out that one of the days that she had a therapy session with somebody, I'm being tortured by 000 and screaming at the top of my lungs, like being electrocuted. And this poor person's trying to get therapy, like, ah! So there are lots of unique challenges with this particular production.
This one gives us some of the opportunities, just like Dooku did, to visit some truly iconic characters. And you held up your little Vader figure before.
Yeah.
I know you've played Vader in a lot of audiobooks. He was in the second Thrawn one, and I mean, more so than just that one. Is it different doing it with just the dialogue versus playing him in a full audiobook?
I guess so, yeah, because when I'm able to just focus on the character, I can maybe stay in the zone a little bit more, and kind of just be in his mindset and his cadence. And I guess sometimes when you're doing all the characters and the narration, like for me, the challenge can be is, you know, kind of bouncing back and forth and trying to kind of get back in their rhythm of speaking, in kind of with dealing with that ping pong match. So it's definitely it's nice to be able to just kind of focus on one character at a time and kind of doing their lines and kind of settle into him a little bit more.
Cool. And of course, we have Han and 3PO and a couple different Wookiees.
Yeah. I guess we're going to process one of them a little differently to try to distinguish them. And I tried to pitch, what's his, Black Chrysanthemum, as I'm saying it right? Yeah.
Sure.
A little bit lower, so to make him more menacing. So, yeah.
Sometimes what we find recording these is like between the droids and the Wookiees, we need them to act. You know, like, you know, there are sound libraries and whatnot of all the sounds, but Sarah has written conversations that they have. So we'll often record Marc doing the howl, the roars, and the yowls and things to sort of give a sense of like what the scene is, how the conversation works.
That's hilarious. I was actually wondering about that because, you know, I've written comic books and I've written like screenplays or things for readings. So I've heard a lot of my work read out loud, and I know how to write dialogue sort of in that format. But when you have things like multiple droids, multiple Wookiees, Darth Vader, who actually doesn't talk that much, but he always has like the breathing. Like, I know there were a lot of moments where, to sort of create the soundscape, it was like, there's a beat here of Vader breathing, so it's like ominous. So it creates that tension. But I was wondering about the Wookiees as well, because I know there were parts where it's just like roaring, and again, it's written in sort of different consonants. But sometimes I would put like a parenthetical that was like triumphant Wookiee roar, or this one is argumentative Wookiee roar, or this is like petty Wookiee roar. Like it's sort of like this is like, since you don't have the words, this is like the attitude. But that's another thing that I'm so impressed with both in terms of what you do, Nick, and what the actors do, like creating that mood and making sure that it gets across.
All those are very helpful. All those little notes and parentheticals were very, very helpful.
Can you do a petty Wookiee roar right now, Marc?
Amazing.
That's it. The rest of the panel is just asking Mark.
Yeah.
We're done. But that is interesting, because Emily talked about like the difference between this and an audiobook, and a regular audiobook. Even Aphra with this, to some extent, extended monologue that could theoretically sort of feel like a first-person book, but these sort of live in a much more present space. These sort of live in conversation. They live in a world where we're listening to the person talk sort of in real time. And I know we did this with Dooku as well, Mark and Emily, that sense of like finding breath and finding sounds to make transitions in the acting. If you want to talk about that, Emily, sort of like finding the ways to bridge gaps.
Yeah, sure. So I guess that a good way to start talking about this is from audiobooks. When we're recording an audiobook, we are very interested in, to the letter, to the punctuation mark, being as true to the author's text as possible. And so you don't often, like you would with a stage production or perhaps on film, where you would maybe change a word here or change the rhythm a little bit or add something. You don't do that with a book. But we had a little more license with the recording of this to be able to color, to literally breathe more life into it by adding the breaths, which was great. Yeah. And I will say also with the audiobooks, because sometimes, they're written in first person and you do get to be a little bit more forward. But even then, most of the time with narration, it's first person, it's not second person. So it's the character in their head, in their voice, right? So you're still a little bit back. With this Aphra story, she's not talking to herself in her head. She's she's talking out loud. First of all, she's talking out loud, and she's pretending like she's talking to somebody else. So that's already a step forward from where books are, even outside of format, just in terms of what the character is doing, it was already forward. Yeah. And then in the scene, you're in the scene. So.
Yeah, and that's another opportunity to find the ways to find.
Right. Well, you don't have anything visual, right? The entire story, a radio play, you have a Foley artist, right? Like the entire story is being told purely through audio. So you have to help create the way the scene looks by audio cues. And it's like the old exercise from, grammar school or whatever, right? Like close your eyes and then listen. And you'll be surprised at how much of the world we ignore when we have vision to help us out, or how much we do get cues audio in audio that we don't even realize we do. Like with electric cars, right? One of the big concerns is that, well, people won't hear cars coming, which we rely on more than we think we do, instead of just like seeing them. And that's, anyway, yeah.
The idea that, you know, all of our phones, when you take a photo with them, our phones click.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't need to do that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason for that except to let you know that you've taken a photo, because
Right. We need feedback, right? So it's a way to create a world that gives you, that orients you, because it feeds back to you. And yeah.
So I think I want to take an opportunity to sort of talk about the scenes that you, Emily, read with Nicole Lewis. Feel like we can tease a little bit about that sequence that you heard with Elizabeth, and talk about sort of like one of these things that we introduced into the play, into the original rather, and in terms of adapting and expanding Aphra's story. So I don't know who wants to talk about that. Sarah, Elizabeth, talk about.
I can start. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think one of the things we were really looking for with this was, where are the kind of opportunities to expand? Where are the opportunities to sort of connect the dots of Aphra's story? Because, you know, as we've all said, like, she kind of comes in and out of the Darth Vader comic. There's parts where she's absent entirely, and so we wanted to know, like, what is she up to while he's off having his adventure on the page? But I think, you know, one other thing that a lot of people know about my work is I'm very into romance, and most of my work is romance to some degree. My heroine complex books are often called romantasy because they are romance and they are fantasy, and they kind of go together. And I was also kind of looking for a connection or a relationship in the story that I could expand on that was not Vader, because I think a lot of her relationship with Vader is in the comic story, and that was something we did expand upon in, you know, the long internal monologue, or the recording she's making or whatever. So I'm a huge fan of Sana Staros, and I have always loved kind of the idea of their relationship, because a lot of what we see of their relationship, what we have seen so far, is way later, when they do not like each other. And it's this sort of sniping, prickly, you know, it's a dynamic that I love. But I always kind of wondered, you know, what was it like when it wasn't that, when it was kind of more of a romance, and maybe a little softer, although not totally soft, because it's still the two of them. So that was something I really wanted to expand on. So we do have a lot of new scenes with Aphra and Sana, and I really enjoyed kind of building their dynamic, the dynamic that we've seen that exists, and then kind of the dynamic of them in the past. And I don't want to give too much away, but I really loved that, because Aphra still is so chaotic. She has always been chaotic. And so a lot of her ideas of sort of what is like romantic or what is courtship are maybe a little bit different than other people's. And, you know, there, for some reason, there was like this motif of her falling off things. Like every time she goes to do something that's like, you know, maybe a little bit of a gesture, or maybe a little bit romantic, she's always like falling off of something. And I thought that was so perfect for her character. And then of course I also enjoyed writing these kind of more soft, intimate moments between them that I thought would then make what happens in the story later much more heartbreaking. Because of course all of our goal is always to rip your heart out. So that was kind of what we were going with there. But I just love them, and I loved getting to write them together, and I loved being able to kind of expand on their story that was already there.
And these were the scenes. These were the because of the situation in the world, we had to record everybody separately. Marc alluded to that earlier. We couldn't get everybody in the studio together, but we recorded Aphra and Sana together. They were each in their own home studios.
Oh, wow.
all on the same Zoom call, recording on their own sides of things.
That's awesome.
So we do it all together. And these are some of the scenes that Elizabeth, you were able to listen in on. You mentioned earlier.
I don't think I have anything thoughtful or professional to add here, just to say they're so good and I love them, and it's everything you ever wanted from a sauna Aphra scene, and just like the chemistry. Again, I am so in awe of actors who can just turn something on and it's so intense, and in the scenes and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go pee now, thanks. It was amazing to watch.
There's also a great, Sarah, I'm glad you mentioned the falling off thing, because there are obviously a number of times this happens in the radio play. And we had Emily and Nicole Lewis, who plays Sana, do them a bunch of times to sort of figure out, like, what does it sound like when you fall from, well, how high is she? How big of a scream is it? How big of an oomph is it when they land on each other, and sort of figure out how to time this all out.
Oh, please tell me you jumped off your bed or something, please. No?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. No. But
go ahead, Emily.
no, it was really great to be able to perform with her in real time. That's gold, to be able to be in the studio together. Yeah, it really changes things, because you discover even more, because you have a whole nother brain there that is coming up with different ideas, and you can play. Yeah, and she's great. I mean, you talk about chemistry, but we've not met in person. Nicole, I hope I may get to meet you soon. But it was easy with her. It's just like, okay, yeah, we're in this. Awesome, cool, let's do this. So yeah, she's great, and I do hope that I get to someday, when we get to see each other in person again, that we'll meet.
Well, we'll have cast parties. It'll be great. I mean, we gotta embrace that once we're able to. I mean, why not, right?
I mean,
we'll retroactively have parties for like the last year.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like we should just get a do-over for everything this year. Like, let's just do it all over. But Nick, actually, I was curious about that, because that, like, when Elizabeth told me, okay, like, the actors, like, they're all pros, they've got all their setups, they're going to record this from home, and they're basically going to be isolated from each other. Like, I wasn't worried or anything, because I was like, everyone's a pro, like, I try, this is going to be awesome. Like, but I was like, wow, that's intense. Like, that's intense to have to do that. Did you have any, like, worries or concern, like, especially since some of these scenes are so intimate and kind of personal for Aphra, like, were there extra challenges, or did you have any concerns about that?
I don't know if concerns is the word, but challenges definitely is. Like, I'm very glad we got to do Aphra and Sana together for all of their sequences. And as Emily said, like, just having them in the room, being able to hear the performances back and forth, I think really, gives that a nice solid foundation. And we started with Emily. We started with 2 days with Emily, and then we went to everybody else. So by then, we had a sort of sense of the sort of energy that Emily was bringing into the thing, and she had set the world for us all, so that when we were recording with Marc or Jonathan Davis or Ewan Morton or Carol Munder or any of the other actors in it, we sort of knew the world that they had to fit into. They're also playing they're playing out of these, like, larger than life or iconic characters. So, I mean, part of the fun of this is it's Star Wars, right? Everybody sort of knows what a Star Wars story feels like. So, you slot in and someone does a voice, and, we're like, bigger. That's a normal person's voice. Normal people don't exist in the Star Wars world, figuring out. Sorry?
Can I jump in here really quick? This is some real insider information, but Nick Martorelli over here was my scene partner for everything.
What?
Wow.
He read
Cool.
every single other line in all of the other than the sauna scenes.
Oh,
that we
I
did.
need to hear this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
On
that's
there,
a,
You're
that's
welcome.
a challenge. That's an extra challenge.
baby.
Release the Martorelli cut.
Exactly. Bonus feature. Bonus feature.
It's true. It's true. I was doing everything, and part of it too is like trying to give Emily something to work off of that I think Marc's going to do. So it's at the same point my best Darth Vader, but also my best Marc Thompson's Darth Vader.
Sorry.
There was one scene though where I got too carried away playing Han Solo, and didn't realize that no one else was talking. I was just still doing his lines. And Kevin Thompson, the director, had the moment where it's like, he wasn't feeding anyone in, he just wanted to do the line. I'm like, maybe, I don't know.
I mean, if you get the chance, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
100%. But all, like between 000, the Wookiee roars, like all of it. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun playing with you too, Emily. But so that was part of the way we had to approach this one, and then figuring out how they're all going to go together and what performances they'll give. And we have terrific actors in all these Star Wars programs, so we knew that they were going to bring their A game to this the way a lot of them brought it to Dooku. So it was a lot of fun. I think we're just sort of approaching the end of our time. So I don't know if there's any final thoughts anyone has. Any final questions for each other? This is the first time we're all together in this grouping, which is actually kind of fun.
I was wondering for both Emily and Marc, like, what was your kind of, and I swear this is not like, tell me how good I am. I'm curious from like a fan point of view, like a pure Star Wars Aphra fan point of view. What was kind of your favorite part to record, or your favorite piece of it? And you don't have to get super specific, because I know we're still trying to avoid like spoilers, but that's what I was curious about.
Marc, do you have a favorite part? And then I'll go to Emily.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you really did do an amazing job, and I love that this is told from her point of view, and it's such a unique way to tell this story, and it really worked really, really well, and I can't wait to hear it all come together. But I think if I had to pick, I love when they're on. I guess we're not really worried about spoilers, right? This has been in the comics for a while now. But like,
yeah, I mean, I guess some of it is out there.
Okay, yeah. But like when Vader and Aphra are on Tatooine, and she's kind of like needling him, and he's like, "Stop your probing," or there's something like that. And it's like, I loved their dynamic together, and I love that she keeps trying to get a reaction out of him, and he's just stoic, and so I can't wait to hear all those come together. Those were a lot of fun to play.
For me, I don't know that I would say it was any particular scene, although I guess what's continued to stick with me, and so I can do it that way. I don't know if it's a favorite, but what the scene that's continued to stick with me is her time in university, with the scenes with Staros. But the reason I think that sticks with me is because I really like seeing her arc, what does and what doesn't change, right, from that time, and then where she is when you see her in the story, when you meet her in the story. Yeah, I just thought that was really, really beautiful and really complex, and is still with me. It's still there.
Thank you. I mean, I think Aphra is still with all of us. We're all still thinking about her. But that's lovely to hear. I mean, I think that that those for me and Elizabeth were like some of the most favorite parts to work on. Were the part on Tatooine where she's trying to needle him, and the parts in university, just because it was like really fun to kind of try to make a bigger picture of her as sort of like, you know, we're hearing directly from her, maybe perhaps the most we ever have. And there was just something really fun about being able to delve into like, what are the different parts of her life where she has been like in different kinds of chaos, and where did those kind of come from? And then of course finding a little bit of what is underneath the bravado.
I hate to cut us all off, but that's about our time. So I want to thank Marc, Elizabeth, Emily, and Sarah for joining me here. I want to thank Comic-Con at Home for having us. And if you like what you heard, you can check us out online, penguinrandomhouseaudio.com. And you can find Star Wars Dr. Aphra wherever digital audiobooks are sold right now. Go check it out. Thank you for having us all.
Thanks, guys.